On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Do you remember the most important event of our time? The terror attacks of September 11, 2001? A lot of people assume that they know what happened on that fateful day, but do they also know what happened just a few days prior to the attacks, for example on the world's financial markets? Hello, my name is Lars Schall. I'm a financial journalist from Germany who has done some research related to the topic of alleged insider trading around 9/11. In the weeks after the attacks, mainstream media outlets reported that some people could have benefited from those terror attacks via speculative trades on the financial markets. In this video, I will try to inform you a bit about this topic. In order to do so, we watch first an interview that the financial journalist Max Keiser conducted with me for Russia Today. In the past, Max has been himself a stock and option trader on Wall Street in New York City. He conducted with me this interview because he was interested in my research that I have written for Asia Times Online, which you can find under the headline 9/11 Insider Trading, the Facts Laid Bare. Let's watch.
Time now to go to Germany and speak with independent journalist Lars Schall. Lars, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Hi, Max.
Okay, Lars Schall, you've just published an investigation into insider trading in relation to the attacks of 9/11. First, tell us about the original mainstream media reports. What had they said at the time about the suspicious trading?
Well, there were a lot of reports in Barron's, in the Wall Street Journal, and other publications which said that insiders of the terror attacks could have profited from those terror attacks via speculative trades, put options, call options, and such things. But then in October, November, December, it went on, but then it was abruptly over with this reporting.
So how much had the put option volume increased prior to the attacks, and in what shares specifically?
Yeah, sometimes sixfold. For example, related to Raytheon, the producer of Tomahawk and Patriot missiles that were used then in the war on terror. But also, these were call options. And then there were also put options on banks that were placed in the WTC, and also reinsurers like Munich Re and Swiss Re, but also AXA. And these were put options, basically, where you bet that a stock price will drop.
Yes, well, in the case of the airline stocks, the put options, the volume and the prices, it appeared as though they were reflecting blown-up airlines before there were any blown-up airlines. It reminded me at the time of what we saw happen with Morton Thiokol after the Space Challenger disaster. Those options traded spectacularly based on that explosion. Here we saw it happen before the explosion. Now, in the 9/11 Commission report also states that there was what looked like suspicious trading, but that on closer inspection, they said it was a reputable firm that had placed these airline put option trades. Tell us about this reputable firm, Alex Brown.
Yeah, it was Alex Brown, which is a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. And they said that this is completely harmless. But what is really interesting here is that the executive director of the CIA at the time of the 9/11 attacks came directly from Alex Brown. And another interesting thing is that the CEO of Alex Brown, on the time of September 11th, on the next day, he resigned from his post, even though he had still a contract for 3 years at Alex Brown. So this is a little bit strange, isn't it?
Well, it demonstrates a direct pipeline of information between the CIA, Alex Brown, where these put options are. And I believe after the events, something like $5 million of profits were never claimed, correct?
Yeah, there are different numbers out, but we can say something in between 2 million and 5 million, yes. But next, maybe I should mention one thing, that there are actually 3 scientific papers about this stuff. One came from the University of Zurich. Mark Chesney is the leading professor there. It's called Detecting Informed Trading in the Option Markets. And everyone who wants to question this topic should read this.
Okay, well, let's talk about Deutsche Bank, of course, is the bank that ended up buying Alex Brown. What has been their response as part of this investigation, Lars?
Yeah, it's the Deutsche Bundesbank, the central bank of Germany, because the head back then in 2001, Ernst Welteke, said that informed trading occurred in the international markets. And I questioned or I forwarded a request to the Deutsche Bundesbank, but they stonewalled. They were only available for me for an oral information. And that was basically that they said, well, the board of the Deutsche Bundesbank was informed on this stuff via charts and analysis from their own house, but they made no real own analysis. And the same applied to other places where I went. They all did not want to talk with me about this topic. Like, for example, the Deutsche Börse or Eurex, which is the futures market here in Germany, and the Swiss futures markets. They don't want to talk about, for example, the results of the scientific paper of Professor Mark Chesney.
All right. Well, presumably there are insiders who would come forward if the government offered some kind of protection or interest in finding out more about this advanced knowledge insider trading around the events of 9/11. Those insiders who may have spoken directly with people involved in these trades would feel more comfortable speaking on the record if the government expressed some interest. Without that, however, certain insiders, I'm sure, will continue to stay behind the scenes. The inside information story in the U.S., of course, Congress is allowed to trade on inside information. So potentially Budgie Krongard, who you mentioned, and other Congress people and insiders in the intelligence industry potentially profiting from trading on these puts, and many of the millions of dollars were never collected at Alex Brown Deutsche Bank from the profiteering that went on from this. It's an inside information is legal. So, maybe they should take more pride in their prowess as traders and step forward and let people know that they're such good traders. If they're going to have insider trading, Lars, why can't people be more braggadocio about their success trading on inside information? Your thoughts?
Well, I think the inconvenient stuff here is that the trade was not organized in an Afghan cave. And this is basically the official story, that the terror attacks came from somewhere in the Orient and were not fabricated on home turf in the USA itself.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to determine exactly where the planning for the attacks came from, but clearly there was enough insider information inside the U.S. ahead of the attacks to, at the very least, they could have prevented the attacks. Clearly somebody in Washington felt it was in their interest to profit from the attacks. They put that ahead of the interest of those who suffered catastrophic loss during the attacks. And that has become kind of the story of the American policy going forward, isn't it? The bankers, it's a great microcosm of what's happened since then. The bankers put their interest and their profits ahead of people. It doesn't matter if people die in the U.S. or die overseas. Their profits come first. Your thoughts, Lars?
Well, the funny thing is you talk a lot about financial terrorists, and here we have terror traders, period.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this has become the de facto modus operandi of the U.S. All right, well, certainly it's a story that is worth keeping an eye on. Lars, Schall, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you for having me.
Now that you have some idea about the 9/11 insider trading topic, I will make you more familiar with it via an interview that I have conducted with Kevin Ryan. Kevin Ryan is the co-editor of 9/11 Truth Studies and a board member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Kevin Ryan has written a long article on this topic about the 9/11 insider trading. Let's watch. Kevin Ryan, you have examined the insider trading or informed trading issue related to 9/11. How did you come to examine this?
Well, I've been studying the events of September 11th, 2001 for almost 9 years. For the last 6 years, I've been co-editor of the Journal of 9/11 Studies. And we cover a lot of different topics related to the attacks of 9/11. And I became interested in this issue primarily through reviewing research done at a website called 911research.com. And they had provided a good deal of information about the 9/11 Commission and how it didn't address the issues raised by the Securities and Exchange Commission very well. So, the 9/11 Commission report claims that the FBI did exhaustive investigations into the issue of 9/11 insider trading. And I began to look into it and found that the investigations by the FBI were anything but exhaustive. In fact, they did not even interview the people who were suspected of 9/11 insider trading. I came across this document that had been released, a memorandum for the record of the 9/11 Commission. It was prepared by a staff member of the 9/11 Commission. His name is Douglas Greenberg. And he reviewed simply the FBI's meetings on their communications related to this. And this document identified a couple of companies that were flagged by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And one of them, this was September 21st, just 10 days after the attacks. One of these companies that was flagged was called Stratesec. And this is a very interesting company because it's a security company that had contracts for the World Trade Center and Dulles Airport, where one of the planes took off on 9/11, as well as United Airlines, which owned 2 of the other 3 planes. So this security company, Stratesec, was a very central player in the events of 9/11, you could say, because they ran security for these different areas in the years leading up to 9/11. So for them, this company stock to be flagged by the SEC was very compelling. And when I looked at this document prepared by the 9/11 Commission, which wasn't released until 2007, I noticed that the names had been redacted of the stock traders, but I could make out who they were. In particular, one of them was a director of the company Stratesec. He was also a director of a company in Oklahoma, an aviation company. He was also a director of a Washington, D.C. based financial organization. With just that information, you could tell very clearly that this man was Wirt Dexter Walker. He was the chief executive officer of Stratesec and also a director there. His wife, Sally Walker, was also named in the flagging by the SEC. So I began looking into that.
Yeah, and Stratesec, even though they failed miserably on 9/11, their stock gained from the attacks because the security companies, their stock was on high demand.
Yeah, that's interesting because in the year 2000, Stratesec was selling off stock, trying to raise money because they had several years of not doing very well. Yet in the one trading day in the United States between September 11th and when the markets reopened on September 17th, I believe it was, the stock of Stratesec doubled. The value of the stock doubled. So Wirt Walker and his wife doubled their money to the tune of about $50,000. Not a great deal of money, but enough for the SEC to have flagged that as a suspicious trade. And as I said, the FBI investigation was very poor. It did not even interview these people. And frankly, it didn't interview any of the people. There were several companies and other individuals identified. They didn't interview any of those people. But with Wirt Walker, they just said something to the effect that he had no known ties to terrorism. And this is one of the most striking aspects of the 9/11 Commission and FBI failure to investigate. The 9/11 Commission basically said that, yes, there does appear to have been insider trading, but because none of it can be easily linked to Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden, it could not have been insider trading.
But if it occurred, for example, at Alex Brown, and there is a loose, at least loose, connection to the CIA, isn't that a connection enough to Al-Qaeda, between the CIA and Al-Qaeda?
I would think so, primarily because of the history of Al-Qaeda going back to the Afghanistan war between, with the Russians, and how the CIA had actually funded the Mujahideen and the precursor to Al-Qaeda. So yes, you would think that would be a connection, but also Wirt Dexter Walker at Stratesec hired several people from a company called the Carlyle Group. And the Carlyle Group had bin Laden family members as investors. Also, Wirt Walker's fellow director, James Abrahamson, was a close business associate of a man named Mansour Ijaz, a Pakistani businessman. And Mansour Ijaz claimed to be able to contact Osama bin Laden on multiple occasions. So there does seem to be some circumstantial evidence indicating that these people were connected to Al-Qaeda, at least to the point where we should investigate.
And isn't it true that also some members of the bin Laden family were actually in Washington at a gathering of the Carlyle Group on 9/11?
That's true. The Carlyle Group had a meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington on September 11th, and present there were former President George H.W. Bush, James Baker, and the brother of Osama bin Laden. I believe his name was Salem. I can't recall his exact name. But they were there, investors from the bin Laden family, meeting with Carlyle Group representatives in Washington on September 11th.
You also are calling for an international investigation of the insider trading issue. Why so? And do you believe it will be successful?
Well, for two reasons. When I first began investigating this issue, I learned that a dozen separate governments had begun preliminary investigations into 9/11 insider trading. None of those resulted in any kind of thorough questioning of anyone who might have been suspected. None of them resulted in indictments. And so I think that there is cause to believe that there was internationally affected insider trading around 9/11. And of course, the more important reason is that the entire world has been seriously impacted by the war on terror, which has its origin as the 9/11 attacks.
Do you think it is a systemic, it is a symptom here that there were apparently call options on Raytheon that were sixfold compared to the days before?
Yes. There are a number of companies that have been shown to have had put options or call options placed on them centering around the events of 9/11. So Raytheon was one of the companies that was located in the World Trade Center towers. It also had a number of employees die on Flight 77, the plane that was said to hit the Pentagon. But there have been previous research articles that have shown that some of the biggest put option occurrences occurred with companies that were in the towers. For example, Marsh & McLennan was a big company in the towers. Citigroup was a company related to Solomon Smith Barney, which occupied a good deal of Building 7. And then there were the reinsurance companies, the Swiss Re and the...
Also Munich Re.
Munich Re as well, yes. So all these put options or call options are very intriguing. There was more to it than that, of course. And the financial crimes that we refer to as insider trading include bond trades as well. The German central bank leader said that it may have also included commodities like gold and oil. And in addition to this, there was the very suspicious trading done within the buildings, from computers at least, within the World Trade Center towers, credit card transactions, and a very high level of credit card transactions. And this has been revealed through the recovery of hard disks from computers at Ground Zero. There is a German company named Convar that had recovered a good deal of these hard drives and referred to what they called dirty doomsday dealings as a result of having recovered the data and analyzed it. So the financial crimes we're talking about, the put option on the airlines and the companies that occupied the buildings, also bond trades, treasury bill trades, credit card transactions done that morning in those buildings. It's very broad and very compelling information that I believe requires an international thorough investigation.
What is the significance of this story related to foreknowledge?
A lot of people have questions about all aspects of the 9/11 attacks, and foreknowledge indicates that someone other than these 19 young men who were largely powerless men, other than being directed by Osama bin Laden and perhaps Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. How could people know in advance in the financial markets? Did they happen to know these young men, or were there others involved who we've not been made aware of? Those are the kinds of questions that foreknowledge would bring about. Certainly, people need to know exactly who the people who committed the crimes of 9/11 are. I mean, otherwise, not only we continue to have terrorism, we continue to see people profiting off of terrorism through insider trades, and our communities, our families are at danger if that is the case.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now I will talk with Michael C. Ruppert, the author of Crossing the Rubicon, a book which was published in summer of 2004. In it, Mike Ruppert discussed the topic of 9/11 insider trading at full length. He is, in my humble opinion, one of the best investigative journalists in the United States. Mike Ruppert, do you know this little book?
It looks kind of familiar. It looks kind of like this one. Yes, that's a book that I wrote that came out in 2004.
Yeah, and it is part of the business library of the Harvard Economics School, right?
It is also, I believe, the second largest selling book in the world about the attacks of September 11th.
And in it you wrote about insider trading or informed trading on the attacks of 9/11.
Yes.
How did this come to your attention?
Well, of course, I was a journalist active at the time with a website From the Wilderness, which is still archived on the web. And from the moment of the attacks, I began an immediate investigation, and it was within a matter of a week or so of the attacks that I became aware of global awareness of massive insider trading, not just in the United States, but in markets from Tokyo to San Francisco to Chicago to New York to London and to Berlin. And so I jumped on that right away.
But one of the most interesting stories has to do with the company called Alex Brown, which is, by the way, the oldest investment bank of the U.S.
Also deeply connected to the George Herbert Walker Bush family and clan, where Prescott Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush had worked in earlier incarnations. Yes.
Yeah.
And one guy who's of interest here is a fellow by the name of A.B. Buzzy Krongard.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
Well, yes. Work I had done prior to 9/11 demonstrated very clearly to me that the intelligence agencies and the financial markets are one and the same. Most intelligence agencies were created to serve financial markets. So right after the attacks of 9/11, the name Buzzy Krongard surfaced, and it was instant research that revealed that Buzzy Krongard had been allegedly recruited by CIA Director George Tenet to become the executive director at CIA, which is the number 3 position right before the attacks. And Alex Brown was one of the then a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. Was one of the primary instruments or vehicles that handled all of these criminal trades by people who obviously knew that the attacks were going to take place where, how, and involving specific airlines.
And another story that you write about is Promise. It's a software by which the intelligence agencies monitor the stock market in real time. Why is this of importance here?
Well, Promise has a very long, deep, and bloody history with a great many dead bodies along the way, and it had been a subject for journalists prior to 9/11. But what was clear right after the attacks of 9/11 was that Promise was involved, as evidenced by stories in major news organizations from Fox to whatever. Promise allows real-time monitoring of stock transactions anywhere in the world. It's been mated with artificial intelligence, and it is a software which throughout the course of the 80s and the 90s was modified by U.S. and Israeli intelligence to include backdoors that allowed the people who provided the software, whether it be to banks or whatever, to quietly go inside and look at everything that was taking place and actually to manipulate data inside any database where it had been installed.
Since we talk about software, there's one story related to Conva, Conva received the order to rescue hard drives from the WTC. And you were contacted by an employee of Deutsche Bank who saw something related to that there was happening something right before the attacks occurred. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, within, I would guess, I'd have to go back and look at the book, but it was no more than a week after the attacks. I was being contacted by a lot of people from inside official sources who were raising a lot of questions. This one particular person was extremely credible. They absolutely convinced me they had been an employee of Deutsche Bank in the Twin Towers. And they told me very clearly that in the moments right before the attacks and during the attack, there was a 40-minute window between the time the first plane struck the World Trade Center and the second plane, that Deutsche Bank's computers in New York City had been taken over, absolutely co-opted and run. There was a massive data purge, a massive data download, and all kinds of stuff was moving. And what this person said very clearly was that no one in the Deutsche Bank offices in the towers at the time had the ability to prevent what was going on from any of their terminals.
And what does the Converse story tell you? For example, the FBI said that this never happened, that Convar rescued hard drives, and basically because everything on the WTC, the facility, was vaporized. But Convar's activity is evidence to the contrary.
Yes, and of course, there is such a mountain of hubris and a mountain of lies covering up the facts around what happened with that, that no government story is credible. The fact of the crime of insider trading was the equivalent, I'm a former police detective, of seeing a dead body in the middle of the street with 100 bullet holes in it. You know a murder has been committed. That's the way the insider trading happened. And everything that has happened since officially from governments has just done, its only purpose has been to tell people that there was no dead body, which is not true. Convar was hired to reconstruct data from hard drives, and I don't think anyone will ever know what was recovered from that effort.
Yeah. What does the whole story about the insider trading or informed trading on 9/11 tell you? For example, our friend Max Keiser always talks about financial terrorists. Do we have here a case of terror trading?
No terrorist organization in the world had the ability to know, to do, or to execute this. That was clearly established, and I believe 2 or 3 years after 9/11, the U.S. government and the 9/11 Commission said there was no evidence that terrorists were making any of these trades. It's not possible. Nobody has access to the markets like that. And again, I come back to the historical, absolute symbiotic linkage between intelligence services and the financial markets. All intelligence services from the first time there was one have arisen from bankers, from the people who move the money. That's what and who they serve. So what the insider trading tells us is that there were a large number of people, unknown how many, a significant number of people, making these massive trades, placing the put options in the week, 10 days prior to the attacks, with complete knowledge of how, when, and where the attacks were going to be executed and which airlines were going to be used. And the point I made very clearly in Crossing the Rubicon is that knowing that the CIA does this, I'd established that it monitors the markets in real time. Plus, when you add the fact that Bundesnachrichtendienst, many intelligence services from Russia to Israel to Germany to, all over the world were specifically warning that hijacked aircraft were going to be crashed into the World Trade Center in the week of September 9th. It is inconceivable that U.S. intelligence agencies did not know that as well. Given the Buzzy-Krongard relationship, it is very clear to me, and that's the case I make throughout the book, Crossing the Rubicon, that an absolutely criminal United States Zionist criminal enterprise, which we see functioning manifestly today, 10 years later, unchecked, not only orchestrated the attacks of September 11th, but made enormous amounts of criminal profit from that. And we are living in the world now with the 2008 and the current financial collapse. We're witnessing what happens when criminal enterprises don't get challenged. And now the current tension that might lead to nuclear war with Israel is the work of the same group of people who got away with that crime on September the 11th, and no one is ever challenged.
Since the beginning of 2005, you were very reluctant to talk about 9/11. You are now talking with me about a specific aspect of it. What has you drove to do this?
Well, the so-called 9/11 truth movement was hijacked by disinformation artists, by profiteers, by con men, to the point where those who had done the original hard professional investigation could not be heard. And there was no additional window after the election of 2004 to really hope for any miracle that we might get this before a tribunal or address some the fundamental crimes. What's different now in 2012, of course, is that peak oil is eating the world. Global economic collapse is fully underway. And the United States and Israel, in order to protect dollar hegemony, are ready to go into a nuclear conflict with Iran. Also, what's different now is that the United States is fundamentally much weaker from the global perspective than it was in 2001. It is no longer able to protect its friends. It's being routed in Afghanistan. It has tried to muscle Iran several times, abject failures on the embargoes and all this other stuff that's going on right now. And the world is recognizing that the U.S. Zionist alliance is the fundamental engine driving all this criminal activity. And I'm hoping, and I'm seeing this willingness emerge, I think, in some governments around the world, that the world which went along with the obvious U.S. lies about September the 11th then, because they had a lot to lose, the U.S. was powerful, is now reevaluating and say, this is nonsense. These people are threatening the life of everyone on the planet. Let's go back and let's tell the truth about 9/11. And I see that as a possible means, if the will is mustered and some major national governments step up to back this, to really end this criminal dominance that's destroying everything right now. All they've got to do is mention crossing the Rubicon. It's 600 pages with 1,000 footnotes. And in all the years that the book has been out, the United States government has spent many millions of dollars refuting so-called 9/11, what they call conspiracy theories. In the 8 years since, with my book being the second largest book sold, the United States government has never been able to say my name once or to admit that the book even exists. That's because they're afraid of it. There's a lot of evidence here, and it's simple. All we need to do is hopefully find somebody with the will to pursue it.
And one last question. Do you think that the approach to follow the money is here the right approach related to 9/11?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. Try again.
Would you say to follow the money is the right approach related to 9/11, for example, related to the insider trading?
Oh, follow the money is cui bono. Who benefited? Follow the money and see where it went. And those records are still around somewhere, but at this juncture, I wouldn't even approach it by trying to do a forensic criminal investigation. I would just continue to put pressure on, and somebody inside who absolutely knows this, and a great many people did, will step forward and start talking about what they know. That's what we need.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Lars.
We are now at the end of this video. For further information, you should read Insider Trading 9/11, The Facts Laid Bare, which was published by Asia Times Online. You should also read Detecting Informed Trading in the Option Markets by Professor Mark Chesney from the University in Zurich, Switzerland. The significance of this 9/11 story was underlined by Max Keiser, who told me, regardless of who did it, we can know that more than a few had advanced warning. The trading in the option market makes that clear. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists, 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 terrorists.